and staying a little bit reserved with the loading, never with the training intensity. That should never ever come to the equation, but more so with the loading. I think that is always going to reap the rewards, because if you can stay a little bit more reserved with loading, pay more focus and pay more attention into your execution, your control over the movements, and intensity with that, I think you'll get much bigger rewards. Because let me tell you one thing, right? And I truly believe that it's much harder to go all out into a set with all out intensity and not lose control.
What's up? Welcome back to Blood, Sweat, and Gear with coaches Skip Hill and Drew Barry. I'm Scott McNally, and today we are joined by gym owner, trainer, and just all-around badass bodybuilder, KUBA CIELEN. What's up, man? Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much, guys. It's a massive honor.
Dude, I think you've... Go ahead.
Skip and Andrew, both legends, and so are you. So you Scott yourself.
Thank you.
But Skip's been around for so many years. It's quite nostalgic because he actually coached and fails. He coached Jordan back in the day. So it's crazy Jordan? To go around because back in those days, I was literally a kid. So it's it's amazing to be sat here being able to speak to you guys.
Well, we're happy to have you, man.
Transfer more money to you. XOXO.
And we're catching KUBA on vacation right now, or holiday, as they say in the UK. You're over in Spain. You give us another look. Where are you at right now? We just saw some boats and stuff out there.
So this is actually
oh wow.
So it's Marbella, and I'm just off Puerto Banús, however you call it. But yeah, it's quite cool. It's a really nice place. Really, really nice place.
Nice.
It's especially this time of the year because there's not many parties going. It's nice and quiet. And the weather is actually really good because it's not too hot, it's not too cold. Like right now, it's probably like 90 degrees Celsius, so it's really comfortable. Whereas in UK, it's extremely miserable. So a week here whilst I'm deloading is going to be amazing.
That'll be good, man. That'll be good. And you said that Dorian's out there. You might try to connect with him, get a workout in. That would be awesome, man. That would be legendary. I hope you get that on video for the YouTube channel.
Yeah, so he actually lives here and he trains in the gym that's 10 minutes away from here, M13. I think it's a 10-minute walk from here, so it's really, really close. I'm training there on Friday, so I'm actually doing legs on Friday, so I'm gonna see if he's available for a PT session.
Hell yeah!
I am hoping he is, and if he is, you'll definitely get to see it.
That'll be cool. So we got a bunch of stuff we're going to talk about today, but of course, KUBA is so passionate about training. I just kind of had a lead topic that I wanted to bring up. And that is, you see a lot of people training both in your gym, on Instagram, throughout your travels. I wanted to ask you this. What are the biggest mistakes that you see people make training in the gym, both new guys and experienced guys? So it's kind of like a twofold question.
New guys walk into the gym and they look at the guys that are already big. They've built enough size and they're quite strong, right? And the new guys already think, right, for me to look like this, I'm going to have to lift the same load that this guy is. And as you can imagine, when you start going to the gym, it's everything you do is like Bambi on ice, right? You've got no skill in training whatsoever. So going into any lift, even a machine that's a fixed movement pattern, your body still doesn't recognize and doesn't know what it's actually doing, right? So I do think people try to run before they can walk. I do think any true beginner should really start with basic movements, the bread and butter movements. I think everybody should learn how to squat, deadlift, and bench, at least safely, because building those foundations and even learning how to brace effectively, that will only set them up for future, and it will only keep them much safer in the training as they progress and as they get more advanced. So I do believe if people try to slow down a little bit and start from scratch, I think that would help. Now, I'll give you a little story, right? When I first started training legs at the gym that I started, the first bodybuilding gym that I went to, Bruno's, back in the day, I was 15 years old, coming in with a school uniform and still. And I started training legs with the cleaner of the gym, right? And I kid you not, for the first 6 months, I literally squatted the bar for the first 6 months, nothing more.
No kidding.
Until I was actually able to squat all the way down, ass to grass, and get 10 to 15 reps. And that was a 20 kilo bar, right? And then I've actually got some pictures like 16, 17. Over a year, I was doing 3.5 plates and then 4 plates when I was like 17 squats for reps, right? But would I have been able to do that if I just started piling on the weight before actually learning how to do movement first? Absolutely not. So, and this kind of follows on with what advanced people get wrong, because if you sometimes can take a bit of a reserved approach and take a step back and try and learn the movement, you will only be able to progress much more off the back of that, and you will be able to stay safer doing so as well over time.
Yeah.
So I think the learning part should come first. And the biggest mistake more advanced people do as well is, again, rushing the loading. This is why you see so many people get injuries. They try to chase a certain load for sake of chasing load, and that's where the form slips, the execution slips, the control slips, and this is where pec tears happen. This is where tendon tears happen. I have never ever seen anyone tear a muscle that has complete control over that movement ever in my life.
Yeah.
The only time I've seen people tear the shit, and believe me now, I have spotted people tearing the shit, and I've seen so many people tear the shit in the gym. It's unbelievable, and the sound that you hear from a pec tear is disgusting. And once you've heard that sound 3 or 4 times, trust me, you never want to hear that or see that again. So the big thing I see with big, strong guys, right? You know you can move load, and even myself, right? I know I can probably lift 20-30% more load than I do across any lift that I do. But for me to be able to do that, there's going to be a big trade-off. I will have to use a lot of momentum, and I will have to probably use all the power in my might and probably throw my whole body into these movements to try and move the load from A to B. Now, doing that is only exposing my tendon to greater load. And I would even argue less tension in the muscle, because what you're trying to do then is just move the load as much power as you physically can. And I think sometimes this is where we get to a point where we get more advanced, we get stronger, we get much bigger, our tendons don't catch up, we load the bar up, and then we tear a shit. And that's the biggest thing that we see with people these days, especially now the guys that are trying to push for more. I think the patience aspect and the learning aspect and staying a little bit reserved with the loading, never with the training intensity, that should never ever come to the equation, but more so with the loading, I think that is always going to reap the rewards, because if you can stay a little bit more reserved with loading, pay more focus and pay more attention into your execution, your control over the movements, and intensity with that, I think you'll get much bigger rewards. Because let me tell you one thing, right? And I truly believe that. It's much harder to go all out into a set with all out intensity and not lose control. If you go into any big compound lift, psyched up, you will be able to move that load, right? But it always must be much easier if you just go fucking bananas and you just bounce out of the hole.
Sure.
Now, it's so much harder locking into a set and knowing the pain that you will be from controlling the movement and then spending a little bit of time in the stretch and then powering up and then doing that over and over again for 8 to 10 reps, for example, on a hack squat. I mean, that's another world of pain, right? It's so much more harder to do that because it's much easier to move load with no control.
Yeah.
Especially when you're trying to push these extra reps. When the pain gets higher, your pump gets, painful. You're fighting against your body constantly. And I think that's some of the biggest mistakes I see people make right now. Just chasing load for sake of load. And the same can even go with like pushing up the body weight. I mean, people just chase a scale weight for sake of chasing a scale weight, right? And it never ever translates to just a ton of muscle. It never does. So, there's so many tangents that can go from that, but these are definitely two most important variables and two most important mistakes that kind of, run from a complete beginner all the way up until, someone that's probably been training 20 years. And another thing that I've found as well these days is if people are known for the lifts on the gym floor or training a certain way, they sometimes will find it very hard to be open to ideas or even try a different way. They're going to find it extremely hard. Like if someone's known for being extremely strong, for example, right? But they are getting to a point in their career where the risk versus reward isn't there. And the loading at times is probably getting to a point where it's extremely risky. because they're so known for that, they will probably refuse to scale back the loading, which then in essence would probably make them a much better bodybuilder and see them progress much more. So there's so many things that we can probably talk about right now where, and everyone sat on this call, right? We can all probably agree upon it because we see it all the time on social media, right? And we see it all the time with just speaking to clients and speaking to athletes in general.
Well, and I think too, I'm going to ask all you guys this because I've seen it. So I don't want to lead the witnesses here or influence the answer. But I see the trend changing maybe just in the last few years where people are starting to get and understand that not training at 100% of your strength is not only safer, because I think at first people were like, oh, okay, it's injury. It's, yeah, I have a chance or a risk of injury, but that's just the only way or the best way to grow. I think people are actually buying in now and understanding that not only is it safer and it can help to reduce injuries, but it's more beneficial. You touched on something that I think is important. I have said, like a broken record, that intensity is far more important than maximizing the amount of weight that you're moving. And I'd go so far as to say this, and Eddie, you were kind of touching on it, so I'm wondering what you think with this. It's almost like the mentality of the set should be not only just to make the set as hard as possible versus just piling on as much weight, but how much can I tolerate versus how much weight can I lift? Because when it's how much weight I can lift, there's an end. And that's why I've always said, and I know that powerlifters come unglued when I say this, but powerlifting is nowhere near as difficult in the 5 to 6 range or the 3 range that a 15, 20 rep set of squats where you just literally feel like your heart is going to blow up and you can't get enough oxygen and you want to die. And you keep thinking, oh shit, I want to, like, I want my quads, I want my body to quit. And I have another one in me. I have another one in me. And they just go slower and slower. And you're like, just get me out of this crappy set. I think it's almost a level of tolerance. And that's where the psychology, I tell this to clients all the time, the set that you're in is almost more, it's far more psychological than it is physical, in the sense of what can you tolerate? How long can you go in that set before you quit, not your body quits? That was like a 5-pronged question. I'm sorry.
I was going to add it. That's why it's great to train with a partner, someone who knows you and your goals are aligned, and they're going to hold you accountable for quality reps. And when your mind starts to falter, when you get to that 11, 12, 13, 14 reps on the hack squat or whatever exercise it might be, they're right there just to give you nope, one more. And maybe you get that one more done and they say, nope, one more. I know you got one more in you, because they're just literally put their hand on the bar just enough to keep you moving. I mean, I can't tell you how many times me and Nate Spear, we go through that every workout. It's truly a gift to have a great training partner. I think having a training partner whose goals are aligned, they understand training, they understand the concept that we're talking about here, safe, quality reps, right? That's basically what we're talking about, safe, quality reps.
See, to do that, you have to use appropriate loading, because if you wasn't using appropriate loading, you wouldn't be safe enough to do so, and you wouldn't be safe enough to be guided to get them extra reps. Now, to me, it's all about making the set as hard as possible, right? So the goal is never to move maximal load. The goal is to create as much tension and as much stimulus in the muscle. And sometimes loading up too heavy, it actually does the opposite, because you've got, as much as people say mind to muscle connection doesn't matter, and to a degree, if you nail your training execution, you nail your setup, your mind to muscle connection is going to be there because it will be on, right? But fact of the matter is, mind to muscle connection still plays a massive fucking role. It really does. So if you're loading above and beyond your means, there's not going to be any mind to muscle connection. And we've seen so much evidence, and Dr. Scott talks about this all the time, on the difference between just moving a load and then moving something with the greater mind to muscle connection and actual feel of the muscle. So sometimes for me, especially in past, when I tried to chase certain loading, I actually looked worse. My physique almost looked tired and flatter and almost constantly inflamed. And it's, the week that you hit just before you deload, where you feel like all shriveled up and just sore and horrible. That's exactly how I felt all the time. Now, with being able to chase quality reps, I think you get a different feeling where, yes, you still feel trashed majority of the time, and you should do, but it's a different feeling. You actually feel like you're not completely smashed and your central nervous system isn't wrecked all the time. It's just more so muscular pain that you feel mostly, and not your connective tissue as well. And another thing that I've actually done recently is I don't wear any sleeves, no knee sleeves, no elbow sleeves, no wrist supports, nothing. Because one thing I've noticed, especially with leg training, my leg training has always been, it's always been very easy for me to get strong. And I know for a fact when I start loading Cybex hack for like 7 plates, I'm going into that set just because I want to move that load and I want to put a heavy set in. But I come away from that set completely wrecked. And yes, my legs feel all right. But when I compare that to doing leg press first and then finishing a hack squat and then really making sure that I control that eccentric and even take a pause in the hole, counting 1, 2 in the hack, and then not exploding out the hole, but still being powerful, but making sure that intent is there on my quads, I come away from all these sets with my legs completely blown. Like, I can do a self hack squat now, and I can come away from it with the same feeling I would get from a leg extension, where my legs are completely blown. Now, the difference that I've seen in not just my recovery, but the look is huge. And I'm not actually using the same loads that I have been before. It is slightly less, but my goal now is to climb up to the same loads that I was using before with equipment, with no equipment, and keeping the same intent on the muscle rather than just moving the load.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of stuff we could go into with this one. I knew that you're always so passionate. Every time if I'm on Instagram and I'm scrolling and there's one of your videos, I know I'm going to get something where you're like on fire. So I knew we could get him going with this one, guys. I knew we could. What's this other topic we had here? We had, I'm going to start out by bringing this picture up here.
Oh,
no, that's the wrong one.
Question,
oh, that's the wrong one, but that's another good picture to bring up while we're at it, though. Congrats on the work you've started doing with Justin.
Yeah, he's a great guy. He's a beast. He really is a beast. Very, very strong and very, very powerful and explosive. So he's a great example, right? For Justin to keep going now, something needs to change or something will literally break. I mean,
well, to that point, did you know he actually, I don't know if he tore something in his quad, but he had something happen. And he never mentioned it to us on the podcast, you guys, when we had him on. It had happened a few days prior to that. At the time we did the show, he didn't know if he was actually going to go and do the show.
You're kidding me.
Yeah.
No, because I'll send a picture to you guys later, but the left quad was so inflamed you didn't see a single line in it. It looked smaller. It looked, and they did some great work in terms of massage and de-inflammation. You can kind of see a tiny little bit now that you're nitpicking and looking, but on stage you really couldn't see it. I was there 3 rows back. He looked friggin' amazing. But yeah, to your point. Sorry to cut in.
It's all good. I think it was his tensor muscle that was giving in, and that was giving him issues a little bit over time as well. But look, that's another great point. In prep, you've got to be careful, especially as certain compounds go in, as your body fat gets lower. But one question for you guys, right? What scares you the most in bodybuilding in your training career, as I would call it?
Tearing something.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, no kidding.
Hearing that pop that we talked about a little while ago. You know?
Yeah.
I'm the same. It's like I sit here and think sometimes, right? And I think like if I was to do something that would put me out of training or potentially even limit my ability to train, that would literally be like world over for me.
Yeah.
So this is where I put a lot more emphasis on really making sure that I can maximize my training. I can still go out and be as intense as possible, but limit, because don't get me wrong, there's never going to be a complete void and you're never going to be able to completely remove that risk of injury, right? Because freak accidents happen. But fact of the matter is, if you take a little bit of smarter approach to your training, you are going to limit that risk of injury to an absolute minimum. especially in a contest prep where you are going to be a lot more sensitive as you're coming down, as you're getting leaner. I mean, we've all done contest preps before, right? When we literally go into sessions and we can feel so fragile. I mean, you know, it's definitely a risky business from that perspective, but that's one thing that really scares me, and that's really opened my eyes up with just thinking outside the box of training a little bit.
I think
look, I'm the old guy here, so I gotta play the old guy card. The older I get, the worse it is, because an injury at 50 or 52 that puts you out for 6, 8, 2 years that you're rehabbing from is completely different. It's bad enough when you're 30. You know, I injured myself. I tore a bicep doing chins when I was 30, 32. Yeah, it was bad, but I went and ate Krispy Kremes for 6 months, and I had, you know, got out of the gym and I had fun with my wife, and my wife was loving that I wasn't training. It's a completely different situation. And I know I have limited time now to be able to do this. So it becomes more important, or that time period becomes more concerning as you age as well.
I want to throw something in too. I think that you have to, the opposite ends of things, Skip, the new guys, like the really young guys, the guys who have never been hurt, you get a sense of invincibility,
Sure.
you know, training in the gym, and you start feeling like, oh, it's not going to happen to me. I can keep going heavier and heavier and heavier. So there's got to be, I think there's some moment for all of us where we do get hurt, and that's where we recognize our mortality, and that's where we start looking at things the way you are, Kuba. It's really hard to get through to the guy who's never been hurt. You know what I mean?
Yeah. See, I've stood over Baz Barraclough, one of the guys that train at my gym, and he was benching 5.5 plates for like a triple, and as I was stood over him, his pec completely popped off his chest.
Oh, God.
And then I was watching another member called Matt benching 5 plates, and same thing happened again. It came down and his pec just went, whomp. Yeah. Oh. And like seeing that, I can still remember it clear as day. And when I see so many things happen, especially with the powerlifters at my place, it's something that I never ever want to see happen with myself, because it's soul destroying, especially some of these guys like Baz. His pecs were unbelievable. And I mean, once you've had a pec tear, I don't care how good, you know, some people really can get away with it, but, you know, we've even got guys that are competing, you know, some of the top guys in the sport now that are pros with pec tears, and it's just never going to be the same.
Yeah.
It never will.
Well, to your point also, it also, like, when they don't win a show, but they look great, in the back of your mind, it's like, if they wouldn't have torn that pec, would they have won the show? You know, I mean, we've had a couple guys win shows recently, like Charles Griffin and whatnot, but like some of these other shows, you know, maybe the Olympia, would his placing have been a little bit better if he didn't have that deficiency? Or Hunter Labrada, if he didn't have that little gap there, would he be moving up in placings just a little bit, you know?
Yeah.
Andrew, that's actually an amazing point, because think about this, right? Hunter versus Andrew at Texas Pro. What if Hunter did not have that pec tear and his chest was a little bit fuller? How would you have scored it?
So I was there at that show, and I was sitting there. I will say this, because I also got to see Hunter at the Tampa Pro just 2 weeks prior. Hunter was a little bit off compared to the Tampa, and Andrew Jacked brought that conditioning that we'd always been waiting for on him. And his posing polish, like that was the biggest thing actually to me, was that Hunter's known for his posing, right? Hunter looked very weathered in his posing within like the first, second round, whereas Andrew Jack's front relaxed. He doesn't even need to pose it. He just opens his arms up and stands there. So there was that little bit too, but I know what you're saying there, because I do feel like Hunter could be moving up a little bit in, say, like the Olympia or, some of the other shows that he does, if he didn't have that deficiency there. And, the other thing is, as someone that's, because I've had a torn bicep, it's always in the back of your mind, and it creates a little bit of, what do you want to, like, a little bit of fear. Like, am I being judged on this? So am I not posing as proud, or am I not opening up the way I would have if I didn't have that deficiency? I think that enters athletes' minds when they have a pec tear or a bicep tear or some kind of deficiency due to their training.
Yeah, I thought you were going to go the other route with training. You're saying from a presentation standpoint, and I agree, but I was thinking the
100%.
How well can
in the gym?
And I've noticed this with my knee injury. Once you're back to 100%, even those people who can compartmentalize incredibly well, it's there. So you have a back injury and you're 100%, but it's there. It's still fresh in your mind. How long does that hold you back once you are 100%? So you not only lose the time for the rehab, but then you lose the time until you psychologically can get past that injury and still train with the intensity that you want to use without thinking, is today the day? Getting anxious prior to going into the session or halfway through the session. Then there's this huge relief when the session is done, like, oh, okay, I got another week before I can F myself up again or have the potential to F myself up again. It's a very, very, it's physical, obviously. But then there's a psychological component that until you're there and you battle the injury or injuries, you can't really understand and respect how long that injury plays into your training and your progress.
All right, guys.
Have you guys ever torn anything? Kuba, you ever torn anything?
When I was 16, I actually tore my pec a little bit, my left pec, and you can still see it.
Like a little twinge, but not a full tear?
Just a little twinge, but you can see it. You can see a little bit of difference. And it always just do McNally. But I tell you what, I spent years training chest with like a slight little feeling in my pec, and it just did not go away for a long, long time. So and I think that's always been back on my mind.
Sorry.
That's always been back on my mind then, where I approached my chest training in a bit of a different fashion, where everything was always super controlled because it had to be, because I always felt that niggle.
Well, so let me ask you this. Do you remember, can you go back to like the little twinge of a feeling you felt right before it actually tore? Do you remember that feeling? Like, it's hard to describe, but it's like it gets a little bit tighter on that one side, right around the, right where the tie-in is. And back when I was younger, because I have had the same thing happen to me several times. When I was younger, I would ignore that, right, and push through it. And then I had something very similar to what you're describing. Now, and even just to this day, yesterday, we were training chest, and we programmed an incline Smith press third in our routine for that very reason, for injury prevention, right? We got up to like 3 plates on it, and I started to feel that twinge, 5-6 reps. Nope, I racked the thing. I'm done with it. I'm not messing with it anymore, Whereas a younger me, pre-tear would have been like, it's just a little tight, and would have kept on pushing through, and ultimately might have actually done some real damage.
I've done that so many times. I had a lot of twinge in my pec before, so I twinged my pec dumbbell pressing once. And I could feel like just a little muscular grade one tear, right? So I did another set just to make sure that it was all right. And I was like, this shouldn't feel like this because I'm in a world of pain, but I'm pressing it anyway. And then that was probably the stupidest idea. But luckily now we've got peptides, we've got all these little things, and little tears like that you can fix in a week. But if it's a big tear, especially tendon, you're looking at a long, long time. So. I think the reason why we do this is speak about this, and we should speak about this really, is more so to help people, open people's eyes and prevent injuries for the future, because imagine how many guys' careers could have been saved potentially if they just scale things down a little bit, or maybe they didn't take that set that they shouldn't have done, and they knew in the back of their mind they shouldn't be taking that set as well.
Mm-hmm. All right, guys, we got to move on. We had some other stuff to talk about, and we pulled this picture up of Neckzilla. And before the show, we were talking about the idea. Kuba, you said that people have been discussing, you've heard lately, of basically downsizing one body part in order to grow another. And this is the guy that came to mind, who this dude's like, he's absolutely incredible from head to toe, if you ask me. But Andrew, what were you saying before the show about when you were looking at bringing his physique apart?
Well, what I was saying was his legs are obviously his most advantageous body part. They're the most developed body part. They're probably the best legs in the eye.
I don't know. That neck is pretty impressive. I mean, let's not,
the neck is impressive too. But the legs are probably the best in the world right now from a sheer size. Maybe he needs a little bit more separation in there. That's more of a peaking thing probably. But what I did was I'm looking, because everyone's been saying, he should just stop training his legs completely, or he needs to figure out some way to improve that upper body because he's got a weak upper body. A lot of people were throwing around the term, weak upper body. And so what I just do is I put my hands over it. I'm doing it right now on the screen over his legs, and I look at his upper body and I say, Well, shit, that's actually one of the best upper bodies in the world still. It's just that his legs are so well developed that it makes his upper body look weak. And so that opens up the discussion of what would we do if we were his coach or his training partner or some kind of advisor to help bring up his upper body? Would we advise not training his legs? Would we advise, pulling him back to training every other week or taking periods of time off to give more recovery to that upper body? So, Kuba, what do you think? What would you do with this?
Get the picture back up, Scott. Please.
Well, I wanted to bring that one up first too. To see what Andrew was saying here. So yeah, I mean, if you were to show me that, I'd be like, yeah, that dude is freaking jacked. First of all, you know what I'm saying? Without even seeing what the legs look like.
So I think the first things first, we need to do a bit of what I would call a bit of a nerdy way. He needs analysis, right? So what does he need to be a better bodybuilder and climb up placings? Obviously, apart from the obvious, his legs do not need to come up. His upper body needs to come up to match his legs, but he's got beautiful ab structure, but the thing with him is that he's actually got really wide hips and wide abdominals, right? So for him to be able to improve his physique, I do think he needs a lot more shoulders, and I would love to see him with a little bit of thicker chest as well. So when he does his side tricep, right, if he had a big old shelf, that side chest and side tricep would look completely retarded. So let's talk about a bit of a training split for Neckzilla. Now, the way I would approach it is this: a chest and shoulders day. Then I would do back and arms, or back and bicep. Then I would probably have him rest. And then I would do an arm day and a separate delt day. Then I would follow that on with another rest day. And I'd repeat that. Now, every 2 weeks, I would have him do an actual leg day and tag some arms on with it. I think that would be ideal because for him, he doesn't really need any more legs. Apart from, I would probably argue a little bit more hamstring. So we could probably throw a little bit more hamstring work in place and potentially add like another hamstring day and a bit of a delt day as well. Because when you compare his hamstring versus his actual quads, his quads do overpower his hamstring a little bit more as well. And to be honest, one thing I'd love to see on more people is a bigger hamstring, because a big hamstring on any bodybuilder just looks sick.
Yeah.
And it's definitely a body part that you don't really see many people have. So in terms of trainer structure, I think that's literally what he needs. Now, Andrew made a great point where he needs all the recoverability for his upper body, because having such big legs, I imagine his legs are going to respond to very little anyway. But having such a big body part, the recovery demand that would be created from training because of how big they are and probably how strong he is, it would be huge. So it does make sense for him to actually train his legs at a much lesser frequency. Now, I honestly think he would probably be able to get away with doing like 2, maybe 3 working sets of quads. And I mean hard sets every 2 weeks max.
He would lose nothing. He might even grow still. You know what I mean?
Yeah, there's that. Yeah. It's possible. You never know.
Absolutely. I think he would. Pardon me.
I could see that. I think, too, one thing to remember is we're talking about an advanced guy here. I think that a lot of our listeners, we do have a lot of guys like you that are listening, but then we have the guys at the other end of the spectrum. How much muscle do you need to have before you actually decide, hey, I'm going to pull back on training my legs, for instance? Or, because I hear it a lot of guys that, men's physique, first-time competitors, and they're like, I need more chest, so I'm going to stop training my legs for now or something,
You said he was advanced. The funny thing is, he's in terms of physique, he's one of the most advanced in the world. But in terms of time in the gym, he's a baby.
It's crazy too, isn't it?
He might have some of the best genetics of a human being that's ever walked the earth to put on muscle. I mean,
I hadn't seen that back, and then I was like, well, let's see what his back looks like. I'm thinking that as you guys are talking, so I pulled that picture up. I'm like, holy,
yeah, exactly. I mean,
that's wild.
It's crazy.
Yeah,
it's unbelievable. Now, how many guys do you have come to you and literally say, what body part do I need to work on when they're nowhere near a level to even win a pro card?
Right. That's what I was getting at. Yeah.
I mean,
that's a good question. Yeah.
It is a great point, because the amount of times I literally have to tell people, you don't have to really worry about that unless you are already winning a pro card and potentially gunning for a pro win. If you are not at that level, there's a 95% chance you don't need to deprioritize anything. You just need to keep growing.
Yeah, it's a great point. But That's a great point. The only thing I'll add is if they're in classic and there's weight cutoffs and because classic is a look. It's not just hitting that weight, height, weight, So I will say there's a little bit more attention that needs to be paid with the classic guys, but I'm 100% with you on the open guys that 99.9% are not at that level of, oh, do I need to downplay this? Do I need to downplay that to make this? You're 100% right about that.
I'm pretty sure I have clients who are listening right now who are laughing because my response to the question of which muscle groups do I need to focus on in the off season is literally, and I'll do it one word every single muscle, and I put one word on each line, and then I laugh about it and make the point that, and it's hard to tell someone, as a paying client, even a friend, to be honest with you, you're not to that level yet. I did it when I was, and I had to realize myself too. Oh, you're splitting hairs here. You're paying attention to minutia that doesn't matter at this point. You need to grow. So it's a very good question, and I think we probably all agree on the answer. It's just get big, and if you get too big, if you're in that 0.5%, you're just too big. Then I guess you can pull back, and that's going to be a lot easier than getting too big.
I would say the problem is
your Neckzilla. Sorry, Andrew. Basically, your Neckzilla if you're too big.
I think the problem though with a lot of our clients is they hear from their friends, oh, if you just bring up your lats, or they hear from people in their gym, their community, right? Whereas like we're going to shows, we're seeing what's winning, we know what it takes to get to that next level. It's kind of like, hey, can you just block out all this other stuff? I'll even say this. Sometimes, like, because you always have your clients go and get feedback from judges after shows, and the judges say like, oh, bring your legs up. So that gets in their head, and it's like too much of an emphasis. Every email for the next month is like, what are we going to do about my legs? What's the plan to bring my legs up? And you're right, Kuba. The answer is still, you need to grow everywhere. You keep growing everywhere, your legs are going to come up.
Yeah.
It's actually a great point about judges' feedback, Andrew, because the amount of times I speak to people about the judges' feedback, and it's like, right, let's take the judges' feedback and let's compare your physique versus the guy that won. Mm-hmm. And judges' feedback here is completely irrelevant because the guy that won is still levels above and beyond to where you are. And I've actually had that with quite a few clients in figure and a few clients in bikini, believe it or not. And they got the feedback, and I was like, look, please just completely disregard this, because let's just compare your pictures, your front shot and your back shot, with the winner of the show. Please look at the biggest difference here. Now, do you see what you need to work on? Now, do you see why I do not agree with the feedback? Yes. Great. Let's crack on now.
A lot of times judges feel like they just got to say something.
Yes, yeah. They do.
Yeah.
They say something. And then and
it's very difficult. People need to understand the judges can't remember. I'm sorry, but they can't remember every single competitor. They can't. We're making notes as quickly as we can make them. But when you come up, if you just walked off stage or we went up next to you while you're on stage, it would be easier to give you feedback. But you walk up, and bikini competitors and women are worse because I'm a guy. So I walk up and I'm like, oh, God, really super cute. And then their husband's standing there and they're asking questions, and you don't, it's an awkward type of thing. And I don't recognize them. I don't see you in your suit. You've got this big, you've got different clothes on. You've got, I don't remember you. So then I have to go back to a number. And then all it is a number and what you remember. It could be 3 seconds of something you remember. And I pay, I assume other judges do too, but at these lower levels, the state shows and even lower level regional shows and things like that, the judges, I'm sorry, but they're just not good enough. They aren't experienced enough typically to remember and then be able to assess. And my question is always, you're gonna take feedback from someone who has seen you for a total of 2.5 minutes on stage versus me. Yeah, I'm just speaking for me, but any prep coach who has been working with you and has seen you day in, day out for the last 20 some weeks. And that's only if we're prepping. I may have seen you for the last 2 years and seen your progress and your growth and everything else. There's one more caveat too. How many people have clients? Because we've all done this, so it's rhetorical. But anyway, how many people have clients as trainers who have been beaten strictly on structure alone? And good and well that You could make every change from a muscular standpoint, condition standpoint, and you're still going to get beat because their structure is so superior to yours and you have no control over that. So you have to play the hand you're dealt. You have to make those improvements on an individual basis based on what your genetic limitations are. But that doesn't mean that even when you make those changes that you're going to win. You didn't pick your parents right. And I know that because as much as I love my parents, I did not go top shelf when I was shopping at the store for my parents from a genetic standpoint.
That's amazing. That's my favorite saying. You've picked wrong parents.
You picked the wrong. I might have great health markers. I might live to be 80 years old and have cycled for 35 years. That's a pretty good gig. But I'm not going to win the Olympia tomorrow. Thanks, Mom. You suck.
Yeah. Well, I was surprised, Kuba, to hear that you spent your first 6 months squatting just the bar. You know, a lot of times I see a guy who's at the pro level and I think to myself, you know, of course, the stereotype in my head is, oh, this guy was probably strong his whole life. He picked up the bar and immediately put 3 plates on it.
Don't get me wrong. Some lifts I was always strong at.
Okay.
because at the time, they really wanted me to nail execution. It was literally just draining with the bar. Every single Sunday morning, they'd be like, right, you're squatting the bar, you're squatting the bar. And then when I finally got like the perfect movement, there was like, right, let's load it. And when I got it, the loading came so quick. Yep. I mean, the first few months, and I was squatting 100 kilo for reps. And I was like at 16. And then 17, I was doing 3.5 plates. And like 18, I was doing 4.5, then 5, then 6. So it's, you know, it definitely flew. But to be honest, genetics-wise, look, we all got to play the cards that we're dealt with, right? My genetics are not elite, but they're all right. They've got me to where I am, I suppose. And I've definitely been blessed with okay genetics to be able to do this. But, you know, I'm never going to miss Olympia, you know, under no delusion of that. And I'm definitely very much a realist and definitely very honest with myself. And I think many more people should be honest with themselves as well when it comes to that.
They'd have a lot more fun with the sport if they did.
100%.
I want to go off. I want to go on that tangent a little bit because how many times do you get clients that are like, because I love hearing you say that, an accomplished pro understands his lane, understands how far he can go and improve if he does the right things. Like I love hearing that because it's a very rational way to look at the sport and while still staying, keeping yourself healthy and sane in the process. But how often do you get people that they're like, I want to win my first show. I want to do nationals and win the overall the year after that. And then I want to win my first pro show 2 weeks after that and be in the Olympia by the time I'm 22. And it's like, you need a dose of reality, kid. Like that's just not in the cards for you. There's like 4 people that are alive at any one time that can be Mr. Olympia, right? Like legitimately, there's only like 4 or 5 people that could be Mr. Olympia if they're with the right prep coach who peaks them right. That's what it is. You know, what do you guys think of that?
I'll skip the first.
Well, I just think it's funny because that's how I thought as a teenager. Winning the Olympia was just a formality. All I had to, it wasn't, I mean, it's laughable. It's almost embarrassing to say, but that's the part that is so funny to me. And I think why when I see kids, I'm different when I see kids in the gym. I'm almost envious because they don't have the perfectionist mentality. They're just in there to train and they're really enjoying it. And that's why I have a hard time giving kids a hard time for peeling off their shirt and posing in the mirror when I really want to slap them. I mean, and I know that one guy that I gave that feedback to on the page is going to be upset about that, but that's the truth of it. It's just such a bizarre way to look at things. I look at them and I go, man, I was there. I used to love, and I love training. Don't get me, I'd love it or I wouldn't do it, but I love it only when I'm there. I don't like it until I get there because I have 8 million other things to do. And I love it when I'm there and I love it when it's done. And I love a good rest day and a Saturday and Sunday when I don't train. So you guys know this. It's far more complicated. It's far more nuanced than we ever thought it would be when we first picked up a weight when we were younger. And it was arguably more enjoyable. It was less stressful. So to have that mentality, I get it and I understand where it comes from. But I also think that as a friend or as a trainer, and especially as a trainer, you need to be honest, and you have to be able to check these people, because eventually they're going to get it. And usually it's when they walk off stage and they're absolutely devastated.
Sometimes they don't skip. Sometimes they don't.
True. That's true. I like to think at some point a rational, sensical person, though, kind of comes of age and they realize, oh man, I'm just not really good at this. And hopefully by then they've kind of nurtured that passion, and I'm a good example. I mean, I just love the process. I'm not, I'm going in and I'm battling for third, and I'll win in a mediocre field, win a class in a mediocre field. I'm good with that, though. It's just something. I love the process. The standing on stage I could do without. Other people, they just, in this, I'm sorry to sound old when I say this, but this younger generation is all about the finish line. And that's what I think that's another thing with the older demographic, the veterans, the people who've been around for a long time. That passion of training is there because it was there before the attention of social media, and it was there before all the pats and the likes and you're awesome and oh you look, it's like an ugly woman going on Facebook and posting a picture, and all of their friends tell them how gorgeous they are. When damn well she's not gorgeous. Like, they're just your friends. What are they going to tell you? It's your mom telling you you're going to win. It's your girlfriend telling you got robbed, and your bros telling you the same thing. That's the times that we live in now. That passion for the journey is not there. I had to actually sit back and get all worked up about this. But the passion for the journey isn't what it used to be. It's more focused on the finish line, and that's disappointing.
All
this
right.
is exactly why I wanted Skip to go first, because listen, I was extremely fortunate to start at a gym where you didn't even think about competing. Competing is something that people did when they was good enough to actually compete.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Like, it was literally like, right, you've been training long enough that you actually look like you could do all right in a bodybuilding show. Therefore, you've kind of earned the right to do one. But it was literally the best guys in the gym that considered competing. And that's pretty much how my journey started. It was never about social media, never about competing itself. Competing itself was like the cherry on top, right? It was just all about training and putting in the work.
Yeah. You were in a select group, a very small group. I'd even argue too, and I don't want to go down this rabbit hole, but I have to still ask this question. There's almost this, where did all this confidence come from the generation? I was insecure. Most of us were like, oh, I'm going to hold back. It's the same thing with trainers. Let's be honest. Nobody 20 years ago or 25 years ago, even 18 years ago, 15 years ago, would jump and go, oh, I'm a trainer. Just out of respect. There were a lot of people who could train people that probably would have been good at it, but they held back because they didn't feel that it was earned or deserved. There wasn't this current level of this bizarre level of confidence that we're all so good at everything we're going to do. Where did this come from? Okay, get off my lawn. I'm done.
Do we have some questions, Scott?
We got a bunch of them. Yeah. We've got one. So I've got some over in the Facebook group for Think Big, and then I put up a thread on Instagram too. So I'm going to start with this from Tommy James. He says, what's the biggest difference that you see in amateur bodybuilding in Europe versus the United States? That's a good one.
That's good. Yeah, that's good.
The posing, number one. I see girls standing there with their arms out like this, and I'm like, what's going on? I don't know what that is.
In the bikini class?
Yeah, you know what I'm talking about, Andrew? They do like this, like,
yeah, but it's become
outfit.
It's become more central. It's become more similar to how we do it in the U.S. So I know what you're talking about over the last maybe 10 to 5 years ago, but it's shifted more as the NPC worldwide has kind of taken over,
homogenized.
In Europe, you've just got a lot more different federations. In USA, there's just NPC, right? In UK alone, there's probably about 6-7 different federations, and they all have different posing, they all have different criteria, they all have different judging. It's a bit of a mess, to be honest. I'm not going to lie, because you've got guys that are legit good bodybuilders that will enter the shit. Sorry, pardon my French. That will enter this lower level fed with terrible judging, and they will get beat by worse bodybuilders because the judging is just awful. So I think that's the biggest difference, if that's what he's implying to in terms of like bodybuilding.
What would be the top? Is the NPC becoming the top, federation in the European, would you say?
Yeah, they're kind of fighting it out, though, right? There's a lot of infighting and a
Yeah.
lot of political stuff going on over there.
You know, it depends which country. Obviously, NPC is always going to be the biggest, but like in Germany and stuff like that, you've still got NAC, a federation called NAC that's quite big. In UK, NABA used to be quite big before lockdown, but to be honest, NPC will and will continue to take over because of the quality of the judging and quality of the athletes. That's always going to elevate the standards always. All the other feds will always be there in the back, trying.
I think the majority of athletes know that the IFBB federation is the federation. If they want to make it a shot at the Olympia or the shot at the Arnold Classic, then you go through the NPC to get a pro card into the IFBB. I think that's probably a driving force as well.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. How about this one? Do you find it useful do you find useful a bigger cut during a long off season, say 2 years plus? So I think he's talking about like recomping during the middle of an off season phase.
So I can take you through what I did, taking pretty much 12 months off. I did my post show, which was a recovery phase. Pretty much six weeks. I didn't really need longer because my blood work was still great, and I only did like 13, 14 week cycle from the show. And then I did a 24-week push-up after that. And I actually hit 52 pounds above my stage weight by the end of the push-up. When I hit that is when I did a 10-week diet after that, before the next push-up. I got to a point not only where my body weight was high, food was super high, I was inflamed, I needed a reset to then continue growing. I think people that try to permabulk get to a certain point where they grow, and then no growth happens. And I would even argue that most people get to a certain set point with body fat where the body's not really in a place where, one, the food is going to be doing anything, but secondly, where the drugs are going to do anything of value, because I do think the more body fat you carry, the more inflamed you are, the worse response you actually get from drugs. So if you are looking to go into a gaining phase, you should always start nice and lean, pretty much for those reasons. Your body will always be more responsive. So I'm definitely a massive advocate of that. But when you take an off season, for example, and you've got, let's say, 40 weeks planned out of that off season, out of that 40 weeks, I would probably only want to see you diet for 10 weeks, providing that 40 week came off the back of a contest prep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can see that.
Makes sense. Yeah. I also want to point out that Kuba mentioned that he did a 13-week cycle into his show, not a 36 week prep, and not a year-long cycle into the show. And then he was healthy and had plenty of room to push on the back end of it as he put that 52 pounds up. It's not uncommon over here to see clients or to see people that will do like a half of a year drug cycle into a show and then wonder why they're not getting results at the end of that. It's like their body's just over-drugged.
Yeah.
So I'll be honest with you. Now I just finished my cycle. I did 22 weeks, and now I'm actually going to do 6 weeks off now before my actual prep. So now I've actually done a bit of a diet phase. I've come down 20 pounds ish, and then I'll be looking to hold my condition now, come off, get nice and healthy, and then I'll actually kickstart my prep from a leaner start point and a healthier start point, because then I know my body will be flying. The prep will be.
You'll grow into the show.
The pieces. Yeah, absolutely. It'll be super easy.
Right on. Kind of related. Do you believe in post-show rebound gains? If so, how would you approach it?
I'll let the gentleman go first. I'm not going to go first, everyone.
I think we all together can say yes. I mean, that part of the question is very, very simple, because there's absolutely a rebound phase. It's insulin sensitivity. We've harped on that for a long time. Insulin sensitivity, either growing or cutting, it's one of the major key factors, if not the key factor for progressing. The second part of the question, what was the second part of the question?
If so, how do you approach it?
Yeah, there you go, Andrew. Run with it.
Yeah, I like the way you did that. That's good.
Simple part of the question. Yeah.
That was a nice lead in. I'm actually going to go one step backwards just for a second, only because I think it's a case by case basis. And I think it's based on how hard that client had to work to get into condition.
True.
Like if somebody was on, 6 weeks of next to no carbs, very few refeeds, 2 hours of cardio, and their body just barely made it to the finish line. I usually am not going to push a hard rebound after that. I'm going to try to do a normalization phase for a few weeks, especially with females. With females, it's really more of a factor of getting the hormones back online, pulling the PEDs out and getting them healthy again so that we can then put them in a position for a longer term growth phase after that phase. But with a general guy, say these guys doing nationals, we'll take Justin Abbott, for instance, he had a great contest prep. He was eating plenty of food going into it. Besides that little injury, I think it was a really smooth prep. Someone like him is in a great position. He's super insulin sensitive to really have a nice 10, 12, 14 week push-up phase and probably put on a good 30 pounds of solid mass before he starts to lose his lines. So absolutely, I'm definitely down on board with that.
So my point of view is changing this a little bit, and it all depends on someone's ability to adhere post-show. The most effective approach I've seen is if I know someone can adhere and they're not going to binge, they can actually withstand the hunger post-show. I prefer to actually do a recovery phase and then a push-up. But in that recovery phase, I actually don't want them to come up any more than between 10 to 15 pounds. And if they're able to do that, that will then set them up for a 20, 24-week push-up where you can pretty much add 50 pounds of muscle. Well, not of muscle, but 50 pounds of body weight, right? And by the end of that total time frame of like 30 weeks, they would still be relatively lean, but that would mean a very controlled and slow rate of gain over that time. And unfortunately, only very few people can do that because I'll be honest with you, I did that after my show last year. And 5 months after my show, I was still clock watching my meals. I was that hungry still 5 months post-show.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
How many times it was the off season? A lot of times is pretty much just like prep from a structure, meal timing standpoint. It's just more food. Yeah. It's still just as regimented. And you're right. Very few people can do that. Vacation here or there, it can really, I don't want to say blow it, but it can. It can. Yeah. There's no other way to put it. Yeah.
It can. Yep.
I also want to drop a little plug for my own classes here. I do these classes for other coaches. I call it coaching other coaches. And I do have one for the post-show phase specifically coming out. I meant to have it out already by the time Nationals was done, but you get busy. I'm going to have a separate men's and a female and a separate male class because I do treat them very differently. Like in terms of males, males, it's always like we got to check their health due to the PED load. With females, it's more an issue of their hormone health. Are they too estrogen dominant? Are their adrenals smoked? Are they in a place where we absolutely need to pull back before we push? So look for that in the future. I'll be dropping it on my Instagram and other social media stuff too. Matt, I see your link. I'll definitely have a link on my Instagram and my stories on my page. So look for that in the near future. I'm almost done the PowerPoints.
All right.
That's a great idea, man. It's a great idea. As many people treat women the same as men. And so great idea.
They're not little men,
I've got just a couple more here.
Some of them are. Okay, that was uncalled for.
What is the highest amount of cardio and lowest amount of calories if you count calories that you've done on a prep? Personally, I don't count calories and I don't want to know. You know what I'm saying? I'm not going to try to add it up when I'm at my lowest. I don't know about you.
Yeah, I'm a macro guy for that reason. I try to pull clients away from the calorie game, especially when it comes to females. Then I found out that I thought it was so brilliant. And then I found out that they can do math very well because their next response to me is typically, well, this is only X amount of calories. It's funny because, and I think you guys have seen this too, the black and white blanket statements that are made on the internet by trainers who want to get attention. So they use their one female client who could take in this excessive, ridiculous amount of calories and get shredded due to picking her parents correctly. And, everybody else, everyone else is stupid, and every other trainer is ruining, females' metabolisms and everything else. When push comes to shove, sometimes look, and it's funny to say the question is how much cardio, because they want to see what the extreme is. But I might have a client who's 92 pounds on stage because she's 5 foot tall. So her calories are going to be, it could be, not will be, because I've said before, and I'll say again, I've had NFL linemen on the same caloric intake as 130 pound, figure girl or something like that, based on, and that's why these formulas are so funny to me, because they don't mean much of anything. Metabolic rate has really nothing to do, or very little to do, with the size of a person or what they weigh on a scale.
Thank you.
So there's a lot of factors there, but you could have someone on 900 calories and 2.5 hours of cardio. It happens a lot. It's how long they're going to be there. If that's a low day, if that is for 7 weeks at a time, and they're on 2.5. And the other part is not just cycling. I know I say the same things over and over, but I just want to drive it into people's heads. There's cycling caloric intake, but there's also cycling caloric output. And to cycle one without cycling the other just seems nonsensical to me. So you don't just want to hammer someone with a ridiculous amount of cardio for days on end. And you don't want to hammer someone with low caloric intake 4 days or weeks on end either. It's a game of balance. You guys know this. It's tweaking. It's fine tuning. If it were as easy as just taking this amount of calories and do this amount of cardio, none of us would. The rest of us, we'd all have regular jobs and we would hate our lives.
2014, I had to do 2.5 hours cardio and 6 fish and green beans meals because I started prep very, very fat. So that was pretty much the last 8 weeks of prep for me.
You beat me. I'd been to like 2 hours. That was my tops ever. 2.5, man, that's a lot of cardio. But I mean, 2 isn't much less.
I was
did
a
3 in
dead man.
2018.
You did 3?
Not to be a one upper, yeah, but not to be like a one, but no, like it was literally, I felt like my whole day was cardio. It was broken up into 45-minute blocks, and then and it was also like I didn't do fish that year, but it was literally chicken and green beans, or chicken and spinach every meal, with the exception of like 1,000 carb refeed, once every 2 weeks for a while there. And it wasn't even like I started out that prep really fat. It was, my body just stopped responding for some reason. It was, and I think it was when I really started getting busy with coaching, and I stopped. Here's the other big thing. I stopped doing a lot of in-person training, because, when you're on your feet training people, even though you're just standing there doing steps, like you could walk away from a shift with 15,000 steps before you do cardio, before you do any of your other exercise activities. And I really got busy with online coaching then, and I stopped doing the training, and I was in a chair all day. So I had to do a shit ton of cardio. And that was not a fun year.
All right. Guy named Justin Wyatt says, LOL, what do you think about Justin Abbott?
That's
we already talked about him.
Legends.
And
I'll say this. I got something to add about it.
Yeah.
And this isn't just me speaking because we had him on the show. This isn't just because, I'm friends with him online. There were 3, 4, 5 of us sitting in a row that were really surprised when the light heavy beat him in the overall. Was the light heavy a little prettier? Somewhat in some cases, but I just don't think you could have gotten over Justin's density, especially in the most muscular, the side shots, like his side tricep. Like I didn't think a big guy could pull off a side tricep as beautiful as he did.
And he's still pretty as well. It's not as if his physique,
Absolutely.
Exactly. I think the only thing that hurt him, and I know these judges, they love a pretty front double. The other kid had a nice front double, and I think that just stuck in their mind, for the rest of the posing class. But I had him winning.
It's the first
Sometimes
shot, and I think
don't sleep with the right people. I mean, this guy's got to learn the game, okay?
That said, for any of our listeners that didn't know, he did win super heavies, and he did get his pro card. So we're talking about the overall, just for anybody that wasn't up to date on that. And then one more, Kuba. Do you laugh and goof around a lot when you're not training? Or are you and Meg just like always serious? Just like, we got to cook our next meal. We got to be hardcore.
So in the gym, maybe sometimes between the sets, but in the gym, we don't really mess around in the gym. But at home, it's a lot of banter. It's a lot of fun. It's around training time. It's fun time, but whilst I'm training, it's got to switch the head on.
Do you guys have anything else for him?
And the thing is, training time as well for me, it's the only time in my day when I truly get time out for myself. So it's like, if I'm training, that's my time, not nobody else's. Like my phone and my work phone is in the car. Like, like there's nobody bothering me for that time. It could be, you know, anything could be happening. So yeah, I'm around the training time. It's fun time, you know. It's fun time relative to the occasion, right? Because training is fun, especially when you've got no phones around you and nobody bugging you. So it just looks a little serious because, you know, you want to get intense.
But do you train at your own gym?
Yes, most of the time. But
so people don't bother you. People aren't like, "Hey, Kuba, that machine's broken," or you know, stuff like, "Hey, how's it going, man?" You know, all that the whole time.
So the staff now know whilst I'm training, I get left alone. Nobody really bothers me, unless some people visit the gym, then say hello and stuff like that. Which, you know, I'm always going to say hello to people. I think anybody that doesn't, they're just you know, they're not a nice person, right? Because it's never going to take away from your session to have a picture of someone or say hello to someone, have a conversation with someone, right? As long as they're not really taking up too much of your time, you're good. But the staff always just, anything that needs addressing, we speak about it before or after training. Whilst I'm training, it's my time.
Right on.
Well, I think that's a good approach because I tell people all the time, there's going to come a time when no one's going to care what you do or who you are. And if anybody in the interim thinks that you're important enough that they want to say hi to you or take a picture with you, be flattered, because not everybody has that, and it isn't always going to be like that.
Yeah. Absolutely. And look, ultimately, it's you know, it's never going to take away from a session either. So I never understood people that are always like, do you know what's the training? We're like, don't speak to them training. It's like, who do you think you are? It's like, you know, you're just a bodybuilder. You're not really anybody, you know. So just remember that.
All right. Well, with all that said, Kuba, we appreciate you taking time out, man, while you're hanging out over there. Oh, looks like we lost Andrew, I guess.
Andrew's out. He's got Andrew other things to do.
He was like, oh, the show's about to end. I'm done. I got stuff to do.
Is that enough?
We appreciate you hanging out with us, man, and taking the time while you're hanging out there in Spain. And we can't wait to see what happens this next season with you two. I'm sure everybody's going to be following along on your social media and on your YouTube channel.
Guys, thanks so much for having me on. And it was great to meet Andrew and Skip officially.
Very cool.
Obviously,
good to have
through
you
the call, but yeah, much appreciated, guys. Thanks so much for having me on.
Yeah, good to have you on too, man. Thank you.